Hello, my name is Andrew Augustine, and I'm going to be talking about the Shawn and Ed Brewing Company, their signature beer, Lagershed Original, and the method to produce a similar beer. Lagershed Original happens to be a bottom fermented pilsner and also a form of lager that happens to be very crisp, herby, and dry. This is generally how it's made. First off, in order to make sure that fermentation succeeds, we need to make sure that the temperature stays between 48 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and we need to be able to ensure that. Next, we need to crush the natural Bavarian malt barley as it goes through the malt mill in order to expose the starches inside before it enters into the mash tun, where it is mixed with hot water, causing the starch to gelatinize and turn into sugar. Um, this process brings out all the flavors and colors inherent in the barley and spreads them throughout the wort. Then, we pipe the wort we have started into the brew kettle, where it is boiled in order to kill any bacteria, and natural Bavarian hops are then added into the currently sugary malt for some bitterness, leading to a balanced taste at the end of the product. Well, this is a little early for that. Then we chill the wort to the temperature primary fermentation starts at before piping it over to our fermenter, where we add our naturally sourced yeast. Once we have introduced the yeast, a biochemical process begins where the yeast ingests most of the sugar within the wort and produces ethanol and carbon dioxide as a waste product, which conveniently enough causes the beer to carbonate from the CO2 and turn into alcohol from the small amount of ethanol, using nature in the process. Also, since the style of lager or pilsner is bottom filtered, we generally use a yeast starter around twice the size of a top fermenter or a top fermented style of fermenter for the same amount of wort, since it requires more aeration during the entire process. Also, we always refresh the yeast starter on the brewing day as well to ensure quality, since it's the best fresh and consistent besides. Um, One of the last steps is doing a diacetyl rest between 65 and 86 or 68 degrees Fahrenheit for around 2 days near the end of the primary fermentation in the fermenter in order to allow for the yeast to settle. And so when piping it to the next station, we can leave behind some of the silt or yeast in order to help filter the beer. We then pipe the newly crafted beer to the beer tank so that it can sit for around 6 to 8 weeks, starting at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and then towards the end of the process, dropping the temperature to freezing over the last few days. This is to mature the beer artificially in a controlled environment through conditioning. Then, when we are planning on bottling or pumping it into a keg, or whichever various form somebody may or may not want. We line whichever storage method we are using with yeast as well, so that you can make sure that it's thoroughly conditioned by the time it's opened, and it will also regain some of the carbonation lost in the transferring process. It's also why tap beer tends to have less carbonation than bottled beer. Um, but anyway, at the end of this somewhat tedious and complicated process, you should have a beautiful and crisp, yet dry Pilsner named the Lagershed Original.